inflation expectation, we can run a survey, online survey, right? And then we will send a questionnaire to the households or individuals who have families of a survey company so that we can collect all the information about inflation and then we can interpret how individuals or consumers they form inflation expectation, right? But now the question is firms' inflation expectation. And what do you think? What is the challenge when we want to know how firms they form inflation expectation? How we can measure firms' inflation expectation? So firms now it's an institution, right? It's not individual anymore. So how we can measure firms' inflation expectation?
The price setting behavior.
The price setting behavior, but how we can do that? This from the last idea. Now we want to see how firms they form inflation expectation, right? So how we can design the questionnaires and who will we send our questionnaire to the firm? Because now it's a firm's inflation expectation, right? And in firm they maybe have 10 people or 50 people, 100 people or 1,000 people, right? Employees and managers in the firm. But each firm we have only one observation or maybe a few observations for one firm.
So when we fill the form differently, I think the challenge is we know that the firm is the organization, not the individual, but at the end of the day, the individual, the representative of the firm will
Answer.
yeah.
And do you think who will be representative to the firms? That is the employee or the managers or which type of managers? So because in the firm they also have many different level of manager, right?
I think in a firm there should be one particular department just to take care of like the pricing, like of the product and manage like the cost of material.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of licenses, then probably we need like someone to be the coordinator, like act as a representative. And that person needs to reach deep down to that particular department because we don't know their organization structure. But there should be a team who their whole job is just to analyze and forecasting the kind of like the cost for the next few years and also the pricing of the product. So they should be in the more better position to give us their take on how they think the price will be changes because of how they expected the cost of the material might be changes due to inflation in the near future.
Yeah, exactly. So the purpose of our survey is that we can send our questionnaire to the person who in charge of price setting of the firm, right? Like the CEOs or CFOs or the manager of the unit who responsible to decide about the price level of price of product, right? So that is the purpose, our aim is to do so. But in reality it's very challenging to do so, right? Because when you send a questionnaire, you can ask that to run to the CEOs or the CFO or the managers of the team of setting price. We answer the survey, but actually we don't know about that, right? It's just on the phone that we do as we request, right? So this typical challenging and typical concerns about the firm surveys when we conduct a survey, we send a questionnaire to the firms. But yeah, the aim is that we want the CEOs and CFOs answer our survey. And in practice, when people they conduct a firm survey, they also have to different varieties. We did a survey to the CEOs and CFO to answer the questions. But at the same time, also some research they just send the survey to the firms, and they also have questions that who answer this survey, and you can tell us about job position in the company where you are employee or manager of different units, right? Whether it's a human resource department or it's a processing department or product development department or it's a CFO or CEOs. So we ask about different the levels of the employees or people who work in the firms. And we also ask about the education level, whether you are male or female, and the education whether people have like bachelor degree or graduate and study or just below the college degree. And we also can ask about not only about the bachelor degree or graduate study, but also about which type of study we have, whether we have studied economics or technology or that also have important factors. And in the survey, they also find that those who are the CEOs and CFOs, their answers about inflation expectation is closer to the actual inflation rate compared with those who are also the managers, but in other departments, like in the human resource department or in the marketing department, for example. So those who are in charge of processing, they have much more information about the price level compared with other managers, and compared with the employee in the company or the firm, for example, the quality of the answer is very similar to the household as well. So it's not much different between the whether they are work for firms or the household. And actually, the household survey, in the household survey, we ask the population in the household. We also have part of people they are CEO, right, or part of them are also who work for the firm. If they are employed, it means that they are work for the firms or some organization already. Because in the household survey, we also have question about your employment status, where you are work full-time or part-time, and which area you are working. And also in the firm survey, they also find that those who work in different industries, they also have different perspective about the price level, whether they work for firms, they work in agricultural sector, or they work in the industry sector. They also have different views about the pricing. So the firm's industry specific characteristic also important factor on how people form expectations about the future macroeconomy, right? Especially those who work in financial sector, for example. They are no different with the professional forecaster, because they have big knowledge about economic issues and financial issues. So when we talk about the firm survey, mainly we talk about the non-financial sectors, like firms they work in industries, agriculture, or in other sectors of the economy, but not in the financial sector. So that is how we talk about the firm survey. We talk about the finance firms work in the finance industry. That is very similar to professional forecaster. Okay, that is some facts about firm survey. So we need to make sure who are responsible to answer our survey, right? So this is important factor. That's why we have misinformation. We just set the questionnaire, and then we don't know who answered the questionnaire, right? And sometimes it would be employee, sometimes it would be the manager, and then we have 1,000 firms, and we collect data, and the data now become very noisy and very hard to interpret, right? So in case that we cannot ensure that only the firm CEOs or CFO answer this question, we have to have one or two more questions asking who actually answer this question, right? Whether the type of job or the position as in the company, whether you are CEOs or managers or the employee level, right? It is important to make sure that we compare the same people, the same level of position in the firm with other firms. So it is important factors. Yeah. Okay, so now we look at some style effects about firms' inflation expectation. And based on papers by Mika Evans and Isco Orton. We are all the pioneers people in the fields of survey data and survey experiment to understand how firms and households may form and make economic decisions. And with this journalist economic perspective, also on the top on the economics. And this slide we show it a kind of summarize all the most innovative method in some specific here is household and firms inflation expectation. And the subjective inflation expectation is that it just measure how people answer the question by the behavior of the household.
Chiều mới trình hả chị?
It's not objective answer.
Thì thầy thuyết giảng xong này thuyết trình tiếng Mỹ rất là nhiều rồi. Thầy thuyết giảng
And now we
thầy làm
have
xong
the
rồi.
first pictures about the data from 1980 to 2001. And we have a household survey from the Michigan Survey Approach Expectation. We work with this data already and already see the results from household survey in also last Saturday. That is the Michigan Survey Approach Expectation is to measure how households or individuals they form inflation expectation. With the blue line here from 1980 until 2021. And then green line here is the professional forecasters. So it's based on the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia. And we already know that this survey is one of the most famous survey of the professional forecasters. This is how we develop over time. And all these two surveys are from 1980 until now. But for the first survey, the data here just started from 2018. So the history of firms macroeconomic expectation survey is very short. So especially even in the US, that is the country with most of innovative data, but even for the firm inflation and macroeconomic expectation survey, the history is also very, very short. Just like from 2018, so just about 7 years ago. So that's why research on firm expectation and the impact of firms inflation expectation on macroeconomic expectation on firms is very, very limited in the literature. Even though that we know that in the macro models, the firms inflation expectation and how firms they set the price is very important in macro models, but in particular the data on how firms they form expectation is very, very limited. So that's why all people, if they work with the firm survey data, it's more likely to get accepted and in the literature at the moment. So because data is limited, and as I said, you conduct a firm survey is difficult, right? Because a lot of challenges new answer survey and how we can contact with firms to get the data, and especially for the firm that should be representative for the economy, and that is it's very challenging. But for household, we have a lot of household survey in many different area of the economic, not only economics, but social, just psychology or sociology, for example. So we have a lot of experience with household survey as you can understand how household survey for expectation, but for firms, the data is limited. So that's why those who work on firm survey data, they are very lucky at the moment. Because the data and the result is limited and new. So, and now, but if we look at the data from firms inflation expectation here, so just from 2018 until 2021, and this is quarterly data. And here we have big pictures about how household and firm and professional forecasters they form expectation. And we have one more line here is a red line, is the asset price from the Federal Reserve Bank of London. And this is not, it is a positive measurement of inflation expectation based on the price level of different financial products. For example, some derivative financial instruments that based on inflation index, so that they can calculate the future price of some financial products are based on inflation. So they can calculate what is the financial market the expected about future inflation, right? Because if they know that some financial product or derivative products are based on inflation to set the price in the next 3 months or 6 months or 1 year, for example, they can check how financial market they think about future inflation, but it's based on the objective measurement of inflation expectation. And actually in academics, before we also survey and professional forecasters survey, they use the information from the financial products in the derivative to know how financial market they form inflation expectation. So the red line here is more or less objective measurement of the inflation expectation. And now we have data from 1980 until 2021. So please have a few minutes, just look at the graph here and tell me what is your impressions. What is the big picture? You can tell me about the development of households and firms' inflation expectations compared with the professional forecast.
Thấy cái là chen không ạ?
Hao sâu nè, hao sâu
Cái gáp
nó bự, gọi là nó bự, cái nhưng mà thấy nó bị oxy nó bị nước lạnh so với thời điểm đó. Biết là những cái lúc mà recession, cái mà crisis đó, cái mà với thằng thì là accept price, the firm là accept price thì nó giống như amplify được cái tác động. Ủa, cái accept price đó là của government mà.
Yeah. Right. So here, actually here is 2020, right? So at this point, the first quarter of 2020, the firms and professional forecaster is very close to each other. Just 1 quarter later, the firms inflation prediction is very close to the households. And in the 2018, the firms and the household inflation expectation is very close to each other. Only one very short period from 19 and 20. For example, the expectation of the firms and the household is about the firms and professional forecaster is close to each other. But in other periods, you can see that firms and household is very similar in terms of inflation expectation. And also, please note that for the firms, inflation expectation here is they can ensure that who answers to the firm survey here is the CEOs of the firms, and because they interview directly the CEOs of the firm. So that is CEOs of the firm. In the US as well, the answer is from the CEO. So firms and household is similar in many areas, and only in short term here, the firms and professional forecaster is close to each other. And for households and professional forecaster, if for 2000, for example, it's quite close to each other, and from 2000 until 2020, here you can see that it's a very much difference between how household they form inflation expectation compared with the professional forecaster, right? And in this period, we can see strongly upward bias of household inflation expectation compared with the professional forecaster or with the financial market participant about the inflation level in the next 12 months from the firms and household. Very short periods of the firms here in the history of data of the firm expectation is you can see that in half of the sample that is the firms and professional forecaster is close to each other, and the other is close to the household inflation expectation. So we can say, and some impression here that firm is somewhere between households and professional forecasters when they form inflation expectation, right? So the quality here is somewhat better than household, but it's still very far from the professional forecasters and financial market participants. And if we look at financial market participants and professional forecasters here, the red line and the green line here, we can see that over time it very close to each other and strongly correlated between professional forecaster and financial market participants derived from the asset price change in the period and so forth. And one more thing with data here is that the author participator, they exclude this on household and firms that have inflation level that is greater than 15% or below -2%. So they truncate data into it from -2 to 15%. And why they can do that? Because we have from 2000 from in recent periods, the inflation is relatively low and stable. So that's why they exclude the data from -2% and 15%. And also in the periods of 1980, during that time, inflation is high in the US, but it's still below 15%. So that they when they want to compare between the households, firms with professional forecasters, they use the most the largest numbers of inflation, actual inflation rate, and minimum levels of inflation. History about sometimes it's an inflation that is no more than -2%. So that's why they use real from -2% and 15%. When they look at the time series from 1918 until 2020. So that is how they truncate the time. They work with time series data. But in our surveys here, we can use, if we look at only households and we don't want to compare the households with professional forecaster or with the financial market participant, we can use a little bit larger range, maybe from -5% to 25%, or from -10% to 30%, for example. Or we also have we can use top 2% and bottom 2%, or top 2.5% and bottom 2.5% to exclude the outliers, right? But because the outliers of the households and the firms and professional is a very different distribution, right? So that's why the bottom of 2% and the top of 2.5% of the household is very different with the top 2.5% of the firms and professional forecaster. So that's why we cannot do that technique when we want to compare both household and the firms and professional forecaster here. And we use ad hoc truncation that is applied from -2% to 50%, for example. But of course, if the referees or people can concern about that, we can do some probability check to see how the result change if we apply the truncation, different truncation method like we exclude top 2% and bottom 2%, both household firms and professional forecast to see how the result changes. For example, whether the story still hold like this one or not, right? That is how we can compare the data of the household and firms inflation expectation. So in very the short story, long story short here is that we can see from this picture is that firms on average inflation expectation is quite similar to household or sometimes close to professional forecaster. So over the period from 2018 to 2021, somewhere between the professional forecaster and the household expectation. Okay, so now we can look at this first one is about the aggregate data over time, and now we look at the dispersion and the distribution of inflation expectation of both the household, firms, and professional forecasters, right? So last Saturday when we look at the distribution of the household inflation expectation, we already see that this one, right? So it is less right skills or left skill. Remember?
Rice skillness.
Right skill, right? So here, what we look at this one, so it's a right skill distribution. So it's a right skill distribution. But now we look at both the household, the firms, and professional forecasters. All the data here is also in the values from 2018 to 2021. So now we look at the same values for both household, firm, and professional forecaster, and we look at the distribution to see the distribution and the dispersion of the household, firm, and professional forecaster in the values from 2018 to 2021. And tell me what you observe from this picture.
It's narrow.
Yeah, the narrow for professional forecaster, right? And also for the firm. And so what does it mean?
No more variation.
Yeah, the variation of the professional forecaster is small, right? And very concentrated in the middle of 0 and 5, actually about 2%, right? From 0 to 5 years old. Most people they expect around about 2%, so it's close to the actual inflation rate in the US from 2018 to 2021. And if we look at the difference between the households and firms here, we can see that the household inflation expectation dispersion is very large, right? So it's very clear from -5 to 25%, but it's a very dispersion ranging from 0 to 25. But we look at when we look at firms inflation expectation here, we also look at higher order of dispersion as well, but less than the household consumer, right? So we can say that the uncertainty of dispersion of firms inflation expectation is less than household, but still significantly larger compared with the professional forecaster. So again, here we can see that firm is somewhere between the households and professional forecaster.
Between.
And if we look at this picture, we can say anything about the uncertainty of household and firm inflation expectation compared with professional forecasting. We already discussed about dispersion, right? The dispersion of the household is larger compared with firms, and firm dispersion is larger compared with professional forecaster. So the heterogeneity and the dispersion is different across different Asian, right? But now can we tell something about the uncertainty of household inflation expectation and firms inflation expectation? If we just look at this graph,
Uncertainty.
the uncertainty or the confidence of people when they enter the
also the least confident.
Right, you can see that.
Because the disperse is huge.
If the dispersion is large, doesn't mean that they are less confident. Right?
Yes.
Because about the disagreement among the household is larger compared to the group, but it doesn't imply that they are less confident or overconfident.
I think that households in general they just have an overview of the entire economy. So they tend to provide the round numbers like as you can see 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So compared to firms or which produce products and compared to professional forecaster who are experts in economics. So the household they may only have the general feelings of how the economy functions. So they may have an expectation that may not accurately reflect the economy. And as you can see, they just give the round numbers like 10 or 15, and so the dispersion is huge. And in contrast, firms they tend to monitor the market really well, so they know the expectation and they can guess the next year expectation of inflation well. And the professional forecasters, the dispersion is not so huge because they already have the tools, they already have the model, so they can forecast very well. So the expectation is low.
Yeah. So very good point. So and also very good argument. It's true, and the point that we can infer from this graph is that we can see that for the households, when they answer the question about inflation expectation, they usually the focal points of 5 or multiple of 5, right? From 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, for example. So it's a signal of the less confidence about the answer, right? Because they just use a round number to answer the question about inflation expectation. It means that they are less confident about the answer or more uncertain about the answer. And compared to firms, the firms also use a focal point of 5, but less severe as household. Yeah. They also can do 0, 5, 10, 50, right? Or sometimes 20 and 25 here as well. Still some fraction of 20 and 25, 15, 10 and 5%. So the firm they also use 4 point of 5, but it's less than the household. So it means that firms also less confident about their operation when compared with professional forecaster. So if we look at professional forecaster versus a few people answer at 5% or close to one more than 5%, they just iterate from 0 to 5. So they are very confident with their answer. That is the first signal about the uncertainty of inflation expectation. Right? It is a proxy measurement of the inflation uncertainty when and if the answer is occurs on the multiple of 5. And the literature they already saw that it is when they also look at the density forecast question or they ask after we provide the answer like this one by point forecast, and they ask another question about how confident you are when you answer when you provide the forecast, and ranging from 0 to 5 or 0 to 10 to show the confidence level, for example. So they also find that those who answer as multiple to 5, they say that they are less confident with the number they provide. So to say that it's about 3.8%, for example. Yeah, and here is another way to measure the uncertainty in inflation expectation. So we know that in our survey so far, if we use a density forecast or here, there is this graph, so the fraction of the household, they say that inflation expectation to be larger than 4%. So in the New York Fed, so the inflation expectation, you know, that the MCP forecast is have a 10% mean, right? From -12 or less than -12 and -12 to -8, and then 0 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 12, and more than 12, right? So here in the share of the household, they state that they state in the B that the inflation expectation is more than 4%. And here, if the share of the household that they say that inflation level will be larger than 4%. So, for example, here in the for this column, we say that about 30% of the household they believe that about 0 to 10% that inflation will be less than 4%. And in this column, it means that about 20%, no, not 20%, this one, just about 10% of the household they think that the probability that inflation will less than 4% is about 10 to 20%, and so on to 1%, right? And, for the last group here, actually, it's very last, about 10% of the household they think that about 90 to 1% for sure that inflation will be less than 4%, but this is for the household. And for the yellow levels here is the share of the household, they the share of the food, they believe that inflation will be less than 5%. So 5% because price is 4%, but it's 5% because in the food survey they use different questionnaire, and they ask the probability that inflation will less than 5%. But it's still, so the aim still we're going to see the uncertainty of the answer. So we still can use this question to evaluate the uncertainty and the little share here. So the fraction of the household, they think that the fraction of the fund, they think that inflation will be less than 5%. And for the red point here with the share of professional forecaster, they think inflation will be less than 4%. Okay? So what we can see from this graph, to see the difference of uncertainty between household, firms, and professional forecaster. Yeah, so now if we look at professional forecaster, we can see that the share of the professional forecaster who think that inflation will be less than 4%. So you can see that it's 90% of professional forecasters, they think that inflation will be less than 4%. That's the probability that's about 0 to 10%. That's a few people, and they think that the chance that inflation will be less than 4% is very small, right? It's about 10, less than 10%. And the likelihood that inflation will be less than 4%, and nearly or 90% of the household, of the professional forecasters, they think so. There's a few of them, they think about inflation will be less than 4%, and they think that inflation will be less than 4%. The likelihood or probability just about 0 to 10%, very small.
Okay, so a large number of professional reading, that it is very like
Less likely.
not so likely that
Yeah.
it is okay.
And it's like
It's different.
yeah, a little bit difficult to interpret this graph, but and then just 10%, less than 10% of the professional forecaster here, they think that inflation will be less than 4%. That probability will be from 10 to professional forecasters, they very very certain about the level of inflation in the future. But compared with both households and the firms, here we can see that a lot of dispersion. Right? So for the households and the firms, a lot of people they give different levels because they think that inflation will be 4% or 5% in the future. And the shares will disperse and also the range in different probability. So this graph shows that both households and firms they are quite uncertain about the future inflation compared with professional forecaster. Yeah, they have one question. So that's one question about what do you think about the probability that inflation will be less than 5%?
1 to 4%.
I don't know.
It's weird, like it choose.
No, but
firms
they,
to have
there is
5%.
a different question. They have a different questionnaires, and the 4% is from the density forecast question in the New York Fed, but in the last time with the New York Fed survey, they have different view. But in the term survey here, they have only one question, and they ask what do you think about probability that inflation will be less than 5%? But it's still natural with uncertainty about future inflation, right? Because the actual inflation rate is already below 5%. So that's why they think about the probability that inflation will be less than the actual inflation rate. 5% is high less compared to the actual inflation rate already. So that's why it reflects the uncertainty about the future inflation. But for Vietnam, for example, we're already around 5%, right? Or close to 5% or many years. So maybe we have to ask about the probability that inflation will be more than 10%, for example, to solve the uncertainty about future inflation, right? Yeah. So in different countries and different context, we need to find the level of the threshold here. And for the US and the advanced economy, they use a threshold of 5. Okay? And now we look at another graph about the link of inflation expectation and inflation perception. What is the link between the correlation of inflation perception and inflation expectation? So the X axis, the X axis here is the perceived inflation. So what do you think about inflation in the past 12 months? The perception of inflation in the past 12 months, and here the inflation expectation in the next 12 months. And here is correlation for the firms, and here is for the household, and the last one is for professional forecaster. So the perceived inflation for professionals here is not as what do you think about inflation in the past 12 months, right? Because for professional forecaster, they have all the information already about the past inflation. So it's not meaningful at all to ask professional forecaster about what do you think about inflation in the past 12 months at the time we conduct the survey, right? But the way they ask professional forecaster is that, for example, they ask quickly, and in March this year, in March 2025, for example, they ask about the Mouse forecast, and they ask what do you think about inflation level in Sokanji at the end of this year. So still in 2025, there's in the next 2 quarters, or in this quarter, you ask what do you think about inflation in the next quarter, for example. So in March, you ask about what do you think about the inflation in June, right? In June, they ask about September or December, for example. So it's very short horizon, but it's still meaningful for the economy to know about it. It's very short term. And for professional forecasters, we call that it's a perceived inflation, but it's a mouse forecast nowcast about the forecast at the current moment, but in the next few months, for example. So, but it's still about the current inflation rate. So we can interpret that as the current inflation rate from the perspective of professional forecaster. Okay, and now we can estimate here the correlation between households, firms, households, and professional forecaster. And tell me what you think about the correlation between these two variables. Any question? Yeah. Yeah. But you need to know what is the impression, what the picture you can see from the common of the.
Transformation of inflation really stick in their mind.
Yeah.
So that reflects in the answer of if you want to be 1% right there.
Yeah.
So they usually use the historical information about inflation to predict
Yeah.
the future inflation. And that's also the same for the household. It's not as strong.
Yeah.
But for the professional, I think they have a lot of sources of data, so they don't just rely on the past information.
Yeah.
But they do the analysis on their own.
Yeah.
So past information does not have a very strong positive relationship, even though it has, but not
Yeah.
so strong.
Yeah, definitely. And how about professional forecasters? You just compare between the firms and the household, right? But professional forecaster.
Yeah, I guess they don't have, it also like have a positive relationship, but it's not as strong.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of points that go really far from the estimated line.
Yeah.
And they're also really small as well, because they just don't rely on the past information.
Yeah.
They have different sources of information to
Yeah.
predict the future.
Yeah. So Austrian is small, right? And correlation is also small. So it's about 0.1, right? So both correct. And here we can see that strong correlation between the firm's perception of inflation and how they form inflation expectation in the next 12 months, right? And the same thing for household, but that the correlation is stronger for firms compared with the household. Because we look at the parameter here, it's 0.92 for the firms, but it's 0.7 for household, and you said about Austrian here also 81%, right?
Yes.
81% for the firms and about 64% for the households. So the correlation is stronger for firm compared to the household when they form. So the correlation between the perception and expectation is very strong for the firm compared to household. But for household here already very strong already. So you can say that both household and firm is very strong correlation. And for professional forecaster here, you see that the correlation is quite small, it's positive, but it's quite small. So one reason that FE Hansen here for the professional forecaster, they have more sources of information about the future. So that's why the link between how they think about current inflation rate with the future inflation rate, the correlation is small. And one more thing here is that we just regarding the economic point of view, we can see that when if we ask about the professional forecaster, what do you think about the current inflation or inflation in the next few months, for example, the variation of the forecast is very small, right? So very small about the variation about the current inflation rate because they have all the information at the current moment already. So if we ask a professional forecaster in the same country, what do you think about the current or inflation in the next few months? The difference in the answer is very small, right? Because they have all set of the information. Maybe they use quite similar technique, so that's why the variation of perceived inflation or the nowcast link between the expectation and the perception of professional is small as well, right? Because this one all also close to each other's reactions.
And that's like even for the professionals, some people perceive the inflation.
Yeah, really. Yeah, because here in the values from 2018 you can see 21. And during the first year of the COVID, actually inflation is very low. Yeah. So in some values it's also very close to zero and in negative percent one. Yeah. But it's a very
Interesting that council on terms of perceive inflation. They always think like, well, the prices are always higher over time.
yeah, and also because of the statistically that of -2%, 15% has dropped, so that's why we distribute quite a lot of negative value. But yeah, in general, just a few households they think that the price level will be negative or deflation. But professional forecaster they know about that, they know the actual state of the economy. In some areas from 2018 to 2021, it's still will be deflation very short. Maybe some quarter. And the last point here also important about the correlation in short-term and long-term inflation expectation. So far we just look at the link between inflation perception and inflation expectation for 1 years ahead or 2 years ahead, right? So, but now we look at the link between short-term inflation expectation with the long-term inflation expectation. So what do you think about inflation in the next 12 months compared with what do you think about inflation in the next 3 years or next 5 years, right? So now we have correlation between the short-term and the long-term inflation expectation. And why is it important to look at the correlation between the short-term and the long-term inflation expectation? Because the correlation here we reflect the anchor of inflation expectation. Because of the definition, one of the definition of the anchoring of inflation expectation is to show that in the long term, because we know that the central bank, the aim of the central bank is to keep price stability in long term, right? Or in the mid term, or in the next 3 years, the inflation will be around 3%, but it's not right now at the moment, but in the long term, or in the medium term, from 3 years and 5 years ahead, it should be around 2%, right? So it means that if they experience with maybe some temporary shock of inflation at the moment, if they still trust the central bank and they still believe that the central bank can change monetary policy to fight with inflation, so the inflation in the future still at 3% or still at the target of the central bank at 2%. So in this case, maybe they can change the temporary inflation expectation or the short-term inflation expectation, but they don't change the belief about future inflation in the long term, by 3 or 5 years ahead, right? So if the link between inflation expectation in the short term and the long term is low, the correlation is low, it means that the anchoring of inflation expectation is higher. Because the short term inflation expectation have no impact on the long term inflation expectation. So now if we look at the link, the correlation between the short term inflation expectation is 1 year ahead and the long term inflation expectation for the 5 years ahead on the y-axis here. And first was for first, and second is for household, and the last one is professional forecaster. And now we can see that all the correlation here is positive and significant, right? And the magnitude of the correlation here is quite close to each other. It's about 0.7 for the household and 0.5 for the household, and also forecasters, they do think that the future inflation will be stay at 2%. At least in the period for 2018 to 2021. And we will just since when we have some action to fight with inflation, if the inflation is increasing in this area. So again, the conclusion for this batch is to look at the correlation between the short-term and long-term inflation. If the correlation is low, it means that the high levels of anchoring of inflation expectation in the long term. But if the correlation is high, it means that the people believe that the future inflation will be driven by the short-term change in inflation. So it means that it will judge the central bank can manage inflation as target of 2% at the peak level. Okay? Yeah. So that's some side effect about the household and firms and professional forecasters when they form inflation expectations.
It's like, in the second graph,
Yeah.
it seems like
This one.
no, this is the second graph for the household.
Yeah.
You can see that almost all of the circles, the blue circle lies on the red line. So why is it also so small?
That's really like for
Like, you know that if the circles are far away, the rest is far away, so
Yeah.
the outskirts is smaller. That's
Uh,
true for the first and the second one. But the third one I thought like it would be like 180, 90%.
no, it does depends on how large it's for the fifth line here. But the answer here mainly depends on the variation of households and
Maybe. I think we
I have
want
to
to
think about that.
I think one reason is that each dot is like the how to say that, the weighted average of the density probability value already. So it's actually valued a lot, but it doesn't show in that one.
The here we get the plot. So yeah. So here's in scattered plot. So it's around this one is about 20 so here. That's the point. I need to think a little bit about that, and then maybe tomorrow or sometime we can discuss it. But that's the point. And then we can see that most households is a value on the fifth line, right?
Yeah.
But for the firms and professional forecasters, it's somewhere around. Okay, that's a good point. We think a little bit about that, and then tomorrow we can discuss. Okay, so that is how the household and firms they form inflation expectation. And now we look at the cause effect of firms' inflation expectation and their economic decision. Okay, and it's based on also paper by Quakion and Shuri Kuromujako and Broken. At the quarterly journal of economics, so it's one of the top 5 journal and especially of any economic books published in this journal. And in this paper, they answer two just questions about how Newton reform the type of inflation expectation and what are the cause effect of inflation expectation on firms' decisions like price setting and the number of employees in the firm, where they hire new people, and we have this with the credit application. So in this paper, they use a survey, online survey on Eastern firms, and conducted on this in 1999. So here's one very data about the first survey they done in 1991 for Italian firms. But one thing, special features of this firm survey, they data is that from 2012 until 2017, the user experiment, but 1/3 of the sample they didn't receive information about the current state of the inflation or the current inflation rate, but some set of the firm they received the information about the current inflation before they answer the question about inflation expectation. And as we know that the current inflation rate is a very important information for both household and firms when they form inflation expectation, right? So here is some set of the sample they provide the information about current inflation rate before they ask the question about what do you think about inflation in the next 12 months or 5 months. But it's interest. That's also an important factor for me to inform about the future injustice in Vietnam. And what do you know about the current injustice for the saving account for 6 months?
6 months, around 5%.
Around 5%.
Sometimes
Nó lên
nó cũng moving around 5%.
And the other
4 to 5.
4 to 5%. 5%. Yeah. So the regulation is around 5% or officially the announcement is about 5% or 6%. But yeah, if we also depends on how much money you keep in the bank and for example, if you have more than 100 million, for example, you can have a higher interest as well. It will be 7%. Yeah. So, and also different banks that offer different interest as well. So normally smaller banks they offer higher interest. Okay, so back to our study here, the first inflation expectation, and 1/3 of the sample the control group, they didn't receive any information about the inflation rate, and they just asked question, what do you think about consumer price inflation in Italy, measured by the 12-month change in the harmonized index of consumer price, really, and over 6 months ahead, 1 year ahead, and 2 years ahead, and for 2/3 of the sample of the group here, they provide they provide the information about the last month inflation rate. So in the previous month, consumer price measured by the 12-month change in the harmonized index of consumer price was the number here, and also last number is the euro area.
Điệu
Yeah,
nó
because
nhìn lên nói xong nó
the
được,
two
nhưng
number,
mà
right?
nó có một
One
số
is
cái câu á,
the inform
nó hay
about the current
nói
state
thêm để
of the
giải thích.
Italian interest rate, but also about the euro area interest rate. That information they provide to the firm, and then they ask question, what do you think
Mà
will
nói
be
chậm á, nó nhanh thì 4 phút, mà nói chậm thì chắc
over
cũng
the
6
next
phút.
6 months, 1 year ahead, or
And hình như nó less confident.
so the control and
Tôi
the
ít là
children
con
group
thấy rồi.
here different
Điều cao đó.
about the information of past inflation. So here is a graph about the aggregate average inflation rate from 2006 until 2019.
Cái biển nó chạy.
And for the control group, here is a who do not receive any information about current inflation, and the treatment group, those who receive the actual inflation rate, the current inflation rate, right? And each month, because here it's panel data, and each month they constantly, if they already in the treatment group, they not only receive in this way, but next way they still receive the updated data about the current inflation rate as well. So if they are in treatment group, question about inflation, the only way we seek the information about the most recent inflation rate during the time of conducting the survey. So that is the difference between many online surveys or in the literature we study so far that we just visit only one time about the treatment, about information treatment. But this study, they provide the information for the treatment group multiple times. So every time they participated in the survey for the treatment group, they receive the new information about the current inflation rate. Okay? And the red line here is for the group, and the blue line here is the actual inflation rate. We know that the data here start from 1999, but they look at the data from 2006 until 2019, and at this point here in the second quarter of 2012, at this point they start doing the experiment that 1/3 of the sample we continue as before without any information before they answer the question about inflation. But 2/3 of the samples they receive the information about the current inflation rate. And now we can see the difference between the treat and the control group when they answer about inflation expectation, right? Because it's a causal effect of the information we provide to see how the firms they form inflation expectation. So what we can see from this one,
They change their estimate about the inflation after treatment.
yeah.
They change.
So now if we look at the before treatment, right? So before
Of course,
treatment, the control and treatment group, they have very similar inflation expectation, right? So at least here, if we look at the control, the red line, and the treatment group, the red line here is very similar, right? No difference because it is randomized. So they have the same level of inflation expectation. But once they split the sample and the treatment group, they receive the actual inflation rate, we can see that
More accuracy, more
inflation expectation of the firms for the treatment group here is very close to the actual inflation rate. And but the control group here, the upward biopsy is larger compared with the with the treatment group, right? So that's first thing, the information we provide actually changes the firm's belief about the future inflation. Just before that we provide the information about the actual inflation rate. So firms here also sensitive with the new information about the current inflation rate. So it means that many firms they don't pay attention to the current inflation rate when they form inflation expectation, right? So it's a quite surprising view because within that firms they are interested in price setting, they should know about the current inflation rate. So if they pay attention to news about the current inflation rate, it means if we provide some information about the current inflation rate, it should have no impact on the firm's inflation expectation, right? But in this picture, we still can see that if we provide the current inflation rate for the firm, it still significantly change the firm's belief about future inflation. So this still new information and important for the firms when they form inflation expectation, right? So that's the first thing. And the second graph here, we look at the dispersion of firms' inflation expectation over time. And the dispersion here we can actually building the standard deviation among firms when they answer the question about inflation expectation. And here also the shows time horizon for 2006 until 2019. And here is the before treatment. You can see that the red line and the black line here is quite similar to each other, right? So the treatment and control group is very similar regarding the dispersion of inflation expectation. But after the treatment here we can see that the dispersion among the treatment group here is substantially lower compared with the control group is not only lead to the firms they have a lower and closer to the actual inflation rate, but they also reduce the dispersion among firms on just group among the about inflation. So the information you provide actually is meaningful and important for the firms when they fall inflation. Right?
Expectation.
So how do the what is the actual risk premium in expectations?
No, so the actual inflation rate here is on the right hand side, so it's only about the level of the aggregate levels of inflation rate. So it's not about the dispersion of actual inflation because we have only one measurement of the actual inflation rate, right? But
The lease agreement, how can we have this already?
so the dispersion here, or this agreement here is among control group of the firms, because we have 1,000 firms. And a third is a control group, and 2/3 is a chicken group. So that's why we have we can calculate the dispersion or standard deviation of the control and the chicken group. So standard deviation among firms, expectation is reflect the dispersion and also the disagreement among firms about future inflation. Okay? But actual inflation rate is on the right hand side, so we can see like the actual inflation rate. And on the left hand side here, we have disagreement and we can measure by the standard deviation. Okay? Yeah. And now we look at the impact of the information treatment on the formation of inflation expectation by 1 year, 6 months ahead, 1 year ahead, 2 years ahead, and 4 years ahead. So for 4 years ahead, here's the question that asked for 2014, after 2014, but before 2014, they only asked from 6 months ahead up to 2 years ahead. Okay? And the treatment here is DT. Is the treatment, but you know that the treatment group here is visit only one time about the information about the current inflation rate, but anytime when the treatment group they answer the question about inflation, they also receive the current inflation rate. So TT here is the current inflation rate for the treatment group they receive. So it changes over time, and that's why we have a TT. But in the information treatment, it changes over time, and it's the current inflation rate as time taken the survey. Okay, and if equals 0, it's a control group. So the control group they receive nothing about the current inflation rate. So the current inflation rate here increased by 1%. So for example, this month and next month and next quarter they survey again and they provide a new update of inflation, current inflation rate, and if the current inflation rate in the next time they increase by 1%, and then the firms, the treatment group come back to the control group, they will update the inflation expectation increase by 0.6% for the next 6 months, and also about 0.5% next 1 year, and 2 years ahead is about 0.47, and 4 years ahead is about 0.4%. Okay? So the magnitude here is large because the 1% is increase in current inflation rate, also leads to updating the inflation rate of 0.6% or 0.5%. And it's a highly significant. And the next graph here, we look at the role of the past information compared with the current information. And just to see the role of the last time or last 2 quarters or last 3 quarters or last year information compared with the current inflation rate, we see on the information of the inflation expectation in the next 12 months. Okay? And here we can see that the current inflation rate is the most important sources for the firms when they form future inflation. And the last time inflation shouldn't have a very limited impact or no impact on the future inflation, and it's dominated by the current inflation rate when they form future inflation. update the firms constantly about the current state of the economy. It's important for them to form future inflation. And the last point here, we want to look at the impacts of inflation expectation on firm decision, right? Because now we have different information to change the people believe about future inflation. We have a randomized here so that we can vary the level of inflation expectation costly. So now we can look at the impacts, the cost impacts of inflation expectation on firms' decisions. And firm decisions here. So panel A with impact on price setting is how much they change their price of their products. And panel B and C is on employment, so the number of employees in the firm. But they use two different surveys. So the panel B, they use a survey of firms' expectation for the same set, the same process with the inflation expectation here. But they also have another data from the statistic office of Italy about the firm survey, but independently from the admin data. So they still can give the survey expectation with the
Số 9 số 8 vậy?
administrative survey data
Đúng rồi, số 9
by
số
the
9.
statistics office. So
cái này nói lâu lắm
for the other data, just to check the quality of the data and from the survey data. So
Thuyết
first,
trình theo thứ tự
we
hay
get
sao?
into the price setting. So one here is the current price level in the current price setting.
Không, ý
And
là
T plus one in the
nhóm
next
1
quarter
này tới
and
nhóm mình
T plus 5 in the next 5 quarter. So what is the effect of inflation expectation on price setting? So here we can see that the magnitude of the effect here is positive and statistically significant, but only in the current
nhớ
values
nhớ là
and the
Nhật
next
Trình nó sẽ
value,
hỏi
right?
rất nhiều.
But it's not after periods or in periods. So the impact here is die out very quickly, and the magnitude of the effect here also quite small. So if inflation level increases by 1%, the price increases by 0.2 percentage point for the first quarter, and the second quarter is 0.8%. So the magnitude of the effect here is very small.
người ta chạy xong cái slide
So
này
if
nó xong
the general inflation rate increased by 1%, the firms will change the increase and change the price level and increase by 0.2%.
thôi thôi
So the magnitude is slightly ugly.
So the FP is the perceived inflation of the past period.
Yeah, exactly. So the inflation rate in the past periods, and here is the current price setting of the first.
đây là mình sẽ hỏi mấy giám khảo
So last year, not last year, but the last quarter, the level of last quarter inflation expectation, and how much they change the price in quarter.
Mình xem hết á. Mình nhắm cuối rồi mình phải
Yeah,
giao vô đi
the headline inflation.
giao về thôi
But it's the effect here is die out quickly, so it's only in for the first.
So we just do the OS on the perceived inflation only.
Yeah.
There's no other controls
No, we also do under demographic control, but here we also use randomized, right? So we probably have
tôi nói là tự nhiên không có mất thời gian để chỉ làm không
estimate the cost effect of inflation expectations on the price of the
cái này mới là cái chuẩn trong cái việc mà thuyết trình nghiên cứu bạn mấy bạn nghiên cứu.
probability of setting the firm being able to
Nếu có
set
một lần nhớ về
that inflation, they're taking into account that
average effect from the time inflation change on the price setting in the next quarter or next 2 quarters, right? So still a lot of firms here they don't change price at all. And just a few firms they change and increase price. And here is average from the firms they do not change price and some firms they change price. So that's why the magnitude of the effect here is quite small. Right? It looks about 0.2%. Right?
So this is like the self-report from the firms or the
Yeah.
administrative data.
Yeah. From the self reported is the price setting from the firm, so it's a self reported. So here they just say about the magnitude on the price change. But I think to measure the point we have to the share of the firm the change price, for example, if we will see the dumping variable to see whether the firm they change price or not, right? And then we can estimate the impact of the inflation expectation change on the likelihood that the firm they change the price, right? But in this paper they didn't show that result, so we don't know about the impact of inflation expectation on the likelihood that the firm they change the price. But we know on average, if inflation expectation increase by 1%, on average, all the firms here they will increase the price level by 0.2%. So 0.2% means that maybe 80% of the change price, so 20% of the firm they change price, but the change price here will be by 0.6%, for example, right? And then we have average, everything here is 0.2, right? That's a good point we got to share. If we want to know about the share of the firm, they update the price, for example, we need to research that variable on the likelihood they change the price. Because they didn't sort the result, so we don't know about that. And so that also could be the reason why the magnitude of the effect is small and it died out very quickly. And the second set of results here we got into the effect of inflation expectation on the number of employees on the employment of the firms. And here we can see that on average it's negative, right? And here it's a log form of the number of employees. So it means that if inflation expectation increased by 1%, the number of employees here is going to be reduced by 0.7% after 1 year, and after 5 quarters is about 1 percentage point. So the magnitude of the effect here is quite large, and also consistent with other sources of the data that we have from the admin survey from the statistics office from the government. But different sources they have different definition of employment of the firm, so the magnitude is different, but it's consistent with the story that when inflation expectation is increasing, they reduce the number of employees because they may be more pessimistic about the future economy, right? Because the firm they often associated with high inflation with lower economic growth. So stagflationary view of macroeconomy. They associate the high inflation with the low economic growth, or the economy will be in the post situation. So that's why they try to reduce and the last one we get into the credit utilization, that is how much credit they use, and the application, the one application from firms. And here we can see that the positive link between the inflation expectation and the level of the quantity of credit they use, and whether they apply for the new credit. And here we can see that it's a positive link, right? And it means that if the household of the firm they increase inflation expectation, they also increase the use of credit, and they are more likely to apply for new credit. right? Because if inflation expectation increase, it means that real interest rate is lower, right? Because the real interest rate is different between the nominal interest rate and expected inflation. But they think that inflation will be higher, it means that the real interest rate from the lending will be cheaper. So that's why they are more likely to apply for credit and use credit for their activity. Okay, so it's quite consistent with the theory that the firms they are more likely to get to use credit and apply to credit when they think inflation will be higher. Yeah, that is the big pictures about how firms they form inflation expectation and how we can see the causal link between inflation expectation with business decision. And we also find that the simple information about the current inflation rate still important and meaningful for the firm when they form inflation expectation. Okay, so that is the big pictures of firm's data, and in general, as I said, it's very difficult and hard to accept the firm's data about inflation expectation, and also hard for us as researcher to conduct a survey on firms. So we need to work with some institutions like the central bank or some statistic office of the countries or some local government, so that we can conduct a survey on firms. And it's quite expensive to do so. But for household survey data, it's quite easy to conduct, and we also can do it by ourselves as well. So that's why in the research, more research on the household or on inflation expectation or macroeconomic condition rather than on the firm survey data. Okay, so that is a big pictures about firm survey data, and in the next few minutes we have 3 presentations. One group goes on the household macroeconomic uncertainty, so another measurement of expectation, but we look at macroeconomic uncertainty, so not only inflation, but we look at macroeconomic uncertainty from impact of household macroeconomic uncertainty on household decisions. And another paper looking at the firm's aspect, but it's a firm's macroeconomic uncertainty on firm's decisions. So same strategy different from household and firms. And the last paper we look at the impact of climate change on how household they form expectation, and we also have RCT and survey experiment to understand the causal effect. So let's take a break about 10 minutes, and then we start with the presentation. And please send me your presentation to my email for presentation. Just send it now.
So sample file for
Only presentation for now. Just send by email. And for presentation, you can use a laptop like you from here.
Gửi cho thầy đó. Gửi cái gì?
chị gửi cái file
Em gửi luôn ngược đi sao?
ý là cái thầy kêu là gửi tầm xong là
Gửi hai sai mà nghĩ vậy cũng thành cốt luôn. Ý là cũng có lý do chỉ cần phải bắt ở đâu. Bữa nào mà kèm được cái tài liệu đâu có chữ nữa đâu đúng không?
chính như là chị
về từ giờ đến 12 giờ là assignment 1 rồi sau cái sau nghỉ trưa là assignment 2 đúng không?
Đúng rồi.
household present first.
Em mới gửi vào bên
Okay, so ready for the first group on the household macroeconomic uncertainty
Tại chưa kịp thì thấy
on household business. Yeah, you can. Or you can send me the slide and you can show me. So you have 18 minutes to present.
Alo. Không em, có gì không? Chưa có lên nè.
crucial for macroeconomic stabilization policy, especially during crisis. So we know that economic theory predicts that higher uncertainty should lead to households to reduce spending due to precautionary behavior, but empirical evidence has remained weak and inconclusive. And also, major uncertainty periods like COVID-19 and financial crisis or wars typically involve simultaneous change in expected growth, both in expected growth and uncertainty, making cultural identification difficult. And as emphasized by Bloom in 2014, the prior literature lacks clean cultural evidence separating first and second movement effect. So that's why this result contribute to the literature for three ways. The first way is about methodology. The result is the first study to use randomized controlled trial method to generate exogenous variation in massive macroeconomic uncertainty at the household level. The second is about empirical contribution. The result provide direct cultural evidence show that higher macroeconomic uncertainty significantly reduce household spending even after control for expected growth as well as the first movement. And the last one is contribution about behavior and micro level. The result using rich household level data to show heterogeneous effects, stronger response among households working in riskier sector, and besides that, stronger effects for household with riskier financial portfolio. About data source, this results due data source from ECB Consumer Expectation Survey, having about 10,000 households with 6 largest Euro area economies, Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Spain. And this data shows in monthly panel structure, and the RCT was implemented in September 2020 with spending outcomes measured 1 month and 4 months later in October 2020 and in January of the next year. So experience design. So this result separate sample in 5 groups. The first group is control group with no information, and the 4 remaining group is treatment group. With the first treatment group is about information about average professional Europe area GDP growth forecast. The second is information about disagreement among professional forecaster. The third treatment information about both information of the first treatment group, and the last one is information about country specific treatment. So this is the information of each group. So now we will go to the empirical strategy presented by my teammate, Miss Lee.
With the empirical strategy, along with the result for this paper, the problem is that the uncertainty is high, usually come with a bad news at the same time. So it's really difficult to know what causes lower spending. This is uncertainty or just bad growth expectation. And the solutions in this paper is use the information about the RCT random control trial to they randomly give for the households different information about the GDP growth, and that this shifts the belief about the means and also shift belief about the uncertainty. And in the my right hand side is a broad map for you easy to follow. The first one I will show the first stage show that the treatment actually shift the belief, and the second one is adequate strategy, and the final is show the main result for reduce from evidence and mechanism. For the next stage, that is the first in my roadmap. That's first stage evidence to compare the posterior belief after treatment to treatment, and this reverse the posterior on the prior and treatment limits and interaction with prior. And the key measures is updating the depends on prior. People with different prior will update them differently. And in the right hand side is the figure 2 with treatments effects on the household belief with the panel A is in line with mean and panel B is in line with uncertainty. For the and the case of figure 2 is the slope. Blind it means that the people will put less weight on their prior. It means the treatments make them updated more. And for the first one, that's the panel A in line with mean. There have treatment 1 and treatment 3 clearly flattened related to the control. Both of them are flat. That's in the red one and the blue one. This means the effective patients are re-anchored. And similarly, for the treatments 2 and 4, both of them change the means much less. But for the panel B, in line is uncertainty. Uncertainty moves a lot, especially under the disagreement type information like treatment 2 and 4 is weaker. So the random control trial create the isolated variations in belief. That's reason why I use IV instrument variable for the next step. And this slide is the second is my roadmap. That's the IV strategy. And the outcomes is monthly household spending in block, measure 1 month ahead and 4 months ahead. First one that is block YI, that's a dependent variable, and order to case reversal posterior mean GDP growth expectations and posterior uncertainty about the GDP growth. However, when run this, the posterior belief may be endogenous. For example, the sentiment affects both belief and spending. So use the random information treatment for posterior mean CDB growth expectations, and for the others is posterior uncertainty about the CDB growth. And the main takeaway is that the treatment shift belief, and we use those shifts to estimate the causal effect of uncertainty on spending. And this is the key result. As you can see in the table 3, the posterior uncertainty has a large negative effect on spending. In the first one, that is that 1 month after treatment, the coefficients of the uncertainty is -3.43 in the circle red. And for the 4 months after treatments, the coefficients of uncertainty is -3.1. All of them are negative effects on spending, and because the dependent variable is log multiplied with 100, so it's really to reach in the percentage. So for the economics manager, the gross seasonal standard errors uncertainty is about 1 percentage point. So 1 percentage point increase in line of growth in spending of just over 3 percentage points at the whole horizon. And the effect is persistent. And final is all of them at the first stage of the mean and the first stage X statistics of the uncertainty. All of them at the first stage is strong, show the instruments are relevant. And this is the final is my roadmap, the reduced from evidence. This is the truth. This is the graph, the figure 3, the control inverted use household with the extreme prior spend less, and for the treatment, households at the extreme tend to spend more than the comparable control. For the treatment, truth is especially useful because it's mainly shift uncertainty. That is the green line, here I show here. It is the treatment rate is basically useful because it's mainly shift uncertainty and it still see the bending difference. So the main takeaways is the reduced form pattern support the IV result. Lower uncertainty will have a higher bending. And for the mechanisms and machine, for the table 6, that is which purchase 1 percentage point increase in uncertainty, lower purchase probabilities, such as holiday package, luxury goods, and homes, and it's consistently with our wait and see channel. And for the table 7, that is the design portfolios, higher uncertainty stricter richer allocation such as mutual funds, cryptocurrencies, and with both table, we have the main takeaways is that uncertainty reduce spending, while core-based cut postpones land purchase and lower staking. And this is the summary of the results for the first day, main result and margin. To help the main takeaway is that the uncertainty master beyond our expectations and reducing uncertainty can support the household demands. And with this slide is with a fast robot jet to grow that the main result is robots and ID identifications is incredible for the instruments still stay strong. And next is the part of my teachers that's beautiful will give you the strength and
Now I would like to wrap up our presentation about paper discussion this morning. So first I would like to discuss about the strengths of the paper. So as you can see, we can see about the green causal identification. The randomized information treatments in the paper isolate the effect of macroeconomic uncertainty from changes in expected growth, which addresses a core identification problem in the literature. And secondly, we can see about the rich micro evidence, the direct measurement of individual beliefs, means and uncertainty, which are linked to actual household spending, provides rare and compelling micro-level support for precautionary and wait-and-see behavior. Finally, the last strength I can see from the paper is the strong external validity in the European area. Large, representative, multi-country household panel, which allows credible heterogeneity analysis and broad applicability within the European area. Also, as we can see, I will present about the limitations of the paper. So, as you can see, it only focuses on GDP growth uncertainty, while it can be specific for the research. The result may not generalize to other dimensions of macro uncertainty. For example, it can expand to inflation, to the policy, to financial risk, and the crisis period context. The research was conducted during the COVID-19 pandemic, when responses to uncertainty may differ from normal business cycle conditions. Finally, the mechanisms only partially observed. The reduced-form effects are clear, but limited data and income risk, credit constraints, and precautionary motive restrict deeper structural interpretation. And this is the end of our first presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Excellent. Thank you for management. 17 minutes. Perfect. Any question from the audience?
Sorry, can you explain again? Like I can't really quite understand how the IV fit into the RCT setup.
why I will instrument as in the posterior belief maybe ensure dosenas. So I use the random information treatments as the instrument for four of them that is the K reversal posterior mean CDD growth expectations, and for the other is posterior uncertainty about the CDD growth.
Yeah, so the group, in this paper, they measure both uncertainty about economic growth before and after the treatment. And the way they vary the level of uncertainty about economic growth, does they provide some professional forecast about the economic condition. And in the professional forecast, they also use both the level of economic growth expectation, but also the high risk and the low risk, and also the uncertainty and professional forecaster about the future economic condition. So because the information about the uncertainty of professional forecasters, that also vary or change people's belief about the uncertainty about the future economic condition at the household level. And they use the treatment here at the ID or instrument variable to change people's belief about the future economic growth uncertainty. And the next step, they just estimate the effect of economic growth uncertainty on different levels of household spending and also different items of household spending as well. So that they can estimate the causal effect of economic growth uncertainty on household spending.
Thank you.
When we did this paper discussion, we also find it's really interesting that actually this is the first time we see the instrument. They use the treatment and also the interact variable treatment with trial to like treat as instrument variable.
Yeah, so they measure both prior belief and posterior belief, as we discussed in our lectures about the magnitude of prior and posterior belief. We saw some problem of priming and grounding impact, and that's why they also use prior belief and posterior belief, and the treatment and the interaction between the prior belief between informs the treatment, and then they have been scattered plot to get the sense of the been scattered plot about the link here. Yeah, just before this, the been scattered plot for the link. Yeah, for this one, so been scattered plot for the link between the prior belief with the posterior belief, right? And the curve with the factor between that the information we provide is more important, right? More important for the household and the form expectation. Right? And then we can estimate the causal effect of economic growth uncertainty on spending. And now we can go to the comments. Yeah, for STEM, I think you make it very clear about STEM papers, but it's point to add some comments here on the paper. I think also very interesting. Yeah, so first we get into the measurement of uncertainty. So in this paper, right, they just focus on the uncertainty on economic growth, but we know that also others uncertainty as well, right? Inflation, policy, financial risk, for example. So the information we provide here about the uncertainty about the economic growth in the future, right? But also the information here also can change the people uncertainty about inflation, right? Or monetary policy or fiscal policy, for example, right? And also financial risk as well. And all this uncertainty also can link with the household spending decision. So it's hard to say that it's just because of the uncertainty about economic growth, but because of change in belief about the household spending or the household spending, right? But it could be partly because of the uncertainty about inflation, or uncertainty about economic policy, with the uncertainty of the economy in general, because all the time uncertainty here is strongly correlated with each other. point, and I think that also it's very hard for the data to do so, but yeah, this is important. And so in this paper, maybe they need to control for the level of inflation expectation or inflation uncertainty or appetite uncertainty as a control variable as well, because in the data they also have questions on inflation expectation, right? And they also have questions on certain centralized, for example, we measure for the policy uncertainty as proxy, right? So in this way, we can partly handle the issues of other macroeconomic uncertainty. And the second thing you mentioned here is that it's a very good point about the study here conducted during the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So we are not sure whether these are generalized to other areas.
Just like the 2008 or similar crisis.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe during the normal time at the moment, for example, whether the uncertainty here can change people predict or criticism about economic condition. And the last point here, you also mentioned a good important point is that the study we conduct here doesn't the reduce from effects. It's not about structural models because we just can estimate the impact of the uncertainty of the input on spending, which is not locked on. Because in the macro model, we can see that it's a system of different equations and different types of it happen at the same time, right? So, but in our input study, we only can account for one dimension. So it always a reduced form. So that is a typical limitation of the input study. We cannot estimate structural models. It's very hard to estimate structural models using the data. We only can use the general equilibrium models, but in that sense, it's theory as well. And then we estimate some reduced form or some result or some prediction in the technical model. So that is important as well. And if we present sometimes we should be open to get some feedback or comment or concern from the theoretical economists. There's always say that it's just reduced from estimation, it's not about structure. But we contribute to people understanding about some equation in the system of the macro model. So that is important as well. And also quite you mentioned there is an important aspect that we need to improve, and at least we need to recognize and we need to acknowledge about some limitation of the survey data or the use of micro data in this setup, right? And also at one important point here is that when we conduct the survey experiment, often users can focus on only one point of time in the data. So that is very hard to see the kind of time series for the past 20 years or past 50 years. It's a time series economy. So that's why we only estimate only one point of time, because experiment is expensive. We cannot go for 10 years or 20 years, right? But on the other hand, we can estimate some causal effect at some point. And one more thing is that the information we provide, we need is a kind of surprise and hit information, right? So that's why they use the time of economic crisis or the time of very high uncertainty to solve people, but the uncertainty is largely that. For example, if we conduct the same study here, but we have an economic stable, for example, so the uncertainty will be very small. So if you just provide some uncertainty among the professional forecaster, but it's very small. In this way, we cannot find any effect of economic uncertainty on the business behavior. So that's why in the information they have to highlight that the difference may be big, right? The difference between the professional forecaster, the high hits and low hits would be 4.9%, right? And then also have to give some comment to that information that the difference here are big or important.